Hello, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Tom DiStasio. Tom is the strength and conditioning coach for Central Community School District down in Louisiana. It's a really cool story how we met. We'll get into that in the podcast, right? But we eventually found out we went to the same small high school, which is always a cool kind of moment to meet somebody from my school where, I kind of, I didn't kind of graduate from. I did graduate, especially if my employers are listening. I definitely graduated high school. Now, it was awesome to meet him, but then it was also really good just to kind of get to know him a little bit better. And then obviously bring him on the podcast, I got to really learn about his thought process. Really his ideas behind constant growth, self-reflection. I thought it was a really, really interesting podcast. And you'll hear me say at the end, it gave me the energy for the day. And that's always the case with these podcasts, right? They always get me excited and kind of renew my love for strength and conditioning each time I listen to them. So I hope you as a listener feel the same way. And I hope you kind of re-engage with your love of strength and conditioning every time you listen to something like this. And, it's easy to do while listening to what Tom had to say and how he views his process of being a coach. So as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Tom DiStasio. Tom, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Connor.
I have to introduce this, and in this initial piece, talk about how we met. So the listeners are aware actually that I've been studying for the starting strength certification. And so, we went down to Wichita Falls, my director and I, which is a whole different story, and we won't talk about how that necessarily went. However, on the way down, we were at the airport and my director actually recognized you from, I believe, the forum or, some other, way via starting strength. And so he was like, "Oh my goodness, that's Tom DiStasio." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know Tom DiStasio, but I'm sure it would be great to meet him." Right. And so I went for a quick walk, came back, and then you guys were talking. And then as we were discussing, right, where we were from, I said upstate New York. And, Tom kind of gave me like a slightly like cockeyed look, just like, interesting. Right. And so we kept talking a little bit more. He's like, "Where in upstate New York?" I said, "Syracuse." And, it's not uncommon to meet somebody from Rochester area, Syracuse area, and he's like, "Okay, what high school?" And I said, "Christian Brothers Academy," which is now, I'll tell you this, I've never met, somebody else from Christian Brothers Academy in the wild. But of course, you came out, you went to CBA. What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2006.
2006. And so I graduated 2014. So 8 years after, right? And so, I mean, it was just crazy to actually meet a fellow Christian Brothers Academy brother out in the wild. And then also to know that there was no strength coach from CBA. I never even knew that some people had gotten in this profession. So I just thought it was really cool that we ended up getting to meet. And then obviously, we chopped up some more and I thought you're an awesome dude. So I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, that was definitely a pleasant surprise, kind of small world where we narrowed it down that we actually went to the exact same high school.
Yeah.
I was shocked, but hey, brothers for life, man. It was good to meet you, and then like you said, good to see a fellow strength coach coming from upstate New York, and being that I've moved around the country a lot. You tell people upstate New York, that's pretty much anywhere outside of New York City. So
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you said that, I was like, oh well, who knows? We'll see. But then we narrowed it down, and same hometown, so that was fun.
It was awesome. Were you there when it was still all boys?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I forget when it changed over, but we were co-ed 7 through 12, so pretty similar, I think, to your experience.
Yeah, but your graduating year was always famous, right? Because I played football there. Obviously, that's the big sport there. Everybody hangs their hat on, and then you guys were state champions.
Yeah, so my junior year we won state championship. It was the claim to fame. We went and played in the Dome, and we played New Rochelle that year. So it was always kind of the big. They had Ray Rice was their running back, and we had Greg Paulus was our quarterback. So it was a heck of a battle. I mean, even to this day, I mean, I got my glory days. I'll still talk about that game for hours on end to anyone who listened. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience playing football at CBA.
Yeah, I know. I remember thinking like, well, our team's gonna be the next one, and then we were kind of a lower time within the CBA football history.
Hey,
But
there's always the ebb and flow. They've been doing great as of late, so it's always
yeah,
exciting.
absolutely.
I mean, I follow upstate New York high school football pretty closely each fall, so it's fun to check in on the old stomping grounds and see how things are going up there.
Absolutely. And it was even funny too. We even remembered the same prayer before class, right? That we always had to do. So
Oh yeah,
it just cracks
everybody
me up,
does. Yeah.
you know. And then Robbie, our director, kind of just looked at me. He's like, "Man, this is insane that you guys actually,
Yeah,
have
you
this
could tell he
immediate
was like, "All
connection."
right, guys, enough of this. We can move on." But yeah, that was definitely fun, and especially meeting up in big airport like Dallas, and it was just kind of like, wow, this is kind of funny. We're both going to Wichita Falls, Texas, which is essentially the middle of nowhere, and it was cool just to see it. Not only a strength coach, but interested in similar barbell top training that I got into, and similar path. I think we both went through, so that was definitely fun.
Absolutely. And then it just goes to show too, I've always talked about in the podcast, always being open to talking to other strength coaches and not kind of having that, air of superiority I can see sometimes between coaches, especially pregame. I feel like it's really common for coaches just to like not even say a single word to each other.
Who's got a
Uh,
bigger chest? Puff it up, and
exa-
yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly. But it's always worked out for me. So I'm going to keep doing it, obviously.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well, can you kind of just give us your background in strength and conditioning and then what's brought you to your current position?
Sure. So, kind of touching on where we met. Uh, Grew up in upstate New York, so I was always kind of a gym rat. Was from an early age started with just personal training, training myself. Started out in the basement of a YMCA downtown Syracuse, kind of a dingy little gym that doubled as a boxing gym, and got into lifting. Just my brother played football. I wanted to be like him, and CBA had a strong culture of um, just training in general. And I was very fortunate from a young age to get hooked up with my strength coach through high school. His name was Mike Gerber, and he was the strength coach at Syracuse University for a long time. He stepped away from the college sector and opened up his own private training facility in Syracuse, New York. And looking back on it, it was an awesome experience. It was called Strength in Motion. I mean, there were him and Coach Corey Parker, who was also a strength conditioning coach at Syracuse University. He's actually back at Syracuse University now. He's an athletic director for athlete performance up there. And I basically lived at that gym. Um, Coach Gerb, he taught me how to Olympic lift, got me involved in Olympic weightlifting from a young age. I loved it, competed in it. Played football, played a lot of different sports throughout my high school career, but the steadfast was always in the gym. So I was lifting, and then as a way to kind of pay my dues, I was cleaning up the gym. Eventually, was able to start coaching some small groups and just kind of soaking up everything that I could, being a gym rat and learning the ropes when it comes to strength conditioning. Uh, from there, I was fortunate enough. I went and played football at Cornell University. Uh, Again, another fantastic experience, not only from an athletic perspective, academic perspective, but also I was afforded the opportunity to work as a athlete under Coach Tom Howley, who was our strength and conditioning coach there, and Jay Andrus, two great strength coaches that are still amazingly still at Cornell. They've been there forever. They're great coaches that really have just built a fantastic program there, and I was able to learn a lot and intern under them as well as an undergrad. And that's where I really started to get to where I was, feeling out and understanding what collegiate strength conditioning was all about. And from there, I kind of had a choice to make once I graduated how I wanted to take things. And um, Coach Gerber, he recommended that I go get a GA position and get into strength conditioning and make it a full-time gig. I was kind of on the fence. I was med school. That's what the route my brother went. Looking at a lot of different kind of, just trying to further my education as a way to basically procrastinate from getting a real job. And um, luckily enough, I was able to land a GA position out at Southern Illinois University. Um, he was a friend of Coach Gerber's, Jared Nesland. He's the head strength conditioning coach at Southern Illinois University, and he brought me in as a GA, and things took off from there. So Jared Nesland was coach there for, I believe it was about 5 or 6 years, and he took a position at Sacramento State. And when I finished my GA position, he took me right along with him. The timing worked out pretty well. Went out to Sacramento State, was there for close to 6 or 7 years. Coached a ton of different teams there. Got a lot of exposure. My main sport that kind of headed up was basketball for a long time, basically throughout my entire tenure there. But we shuffled the deck. Everybody worked with football. It was pretty much all hands on deck with football. But one thing that was awesome, and that Coach Neslin really uh, he was able to foster a lot of development for all of his young and assistant coaches was, we weren't married to teams throughout like our entire career. So I was able to work with women's soccer. I was able to work with throwers, volleyball, men's basketball, so you name it. I basically got to coach all sorts of different athletes there. And that gave me a lot of exposure and kind of the confidence to be able to branch out and take a head strength conditioning position. That was out at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. That was awesome. Great opportunity out there where, again, just taking a program and trying to make it into something that we were all proud of. The AD there, Ed Scott, he took a chance on me as a young strength coach and basically said, "Hey, this is yours. Figure it out and don't screw this up." And we were able to do some really great stuff there at Morgan State. Had some great athletes. Worked with all the teams there. A lot of exposure. We had 14 different sports programs at the time, and that really was my big exposure to running a program. After Morgan State, well, COVID hit, and that kind of gave me a little bit of a breather from all that is college strength conditioning, and from there I was you know in a different phase of life than I was as a 20-year-old, and I had some buddies that had moved on to the tactical setting, and it's something that I've always really looked into, something that I kind of wanted to try at some point. Just I don't know, maybe the altruistic side of me, but also just kind of how cool it is to work with people who serve our country and the ability to kind of just get involved in that style of training, that mindset, learn from all that is our U.S. military. So I was fortunate enough to get a position out in Phoenix, Arizona, working for the Air Force at a training base, training fighter pilots. So Luke Air Force Base was the base that I was at. It was pretty cool there. I was training F-16 and F-35 fighter pilots. A lot of really innovative stuff there. Joe Hook was the program manager there, and they were really doing a lot of cutting edge stuff to bring human performance to the Air Force, which was kind of a little bit lagging in the what they had to offer for pilots to keep them in the jets. It's a very physical, demanding job flying fighter jets. A lot of strain on the upper back, neck, overall. Just these guys are getting beat up there, flying at 8, 9 Gs and doing all these pretty complex, amazing maneuvers for a very, very long career. So our goal was to really help these guys out in terms of performance and longevity in there, and they implemented a lot of cool programming that spread throughout the entire Air Force. So it was fun to be a part of that and kind of help kick things off over there. Until one day I got a call from a recruiter and want to know if I wanted to head out to Virginia Beach to work for Naval Special Warfare Group 2, training Navy SEALs. And that really struck a big interest in me. I've always respected and just admired the Navy SEALs and what they do, what they're about, their ethos, and all that is a Navy SEAL. Just from watching movies and reading books and kind of the Hollywood aspect of it. So I packed my bags and moved out to Virginia Beach. Um, Worked out there with the Navy SEALs, and it was a fantastic opportunity there to. I think I definitely took more from them than I gave back. The things that they are about and the way that they train, not just mentally, but the way that they physically develop those guys and their ability to just be resourceful and find ways to grow and better themselves. I was really able to learn a lot and take a lot personally as a human being, but also for my coaching career. Um, but after a little while, I really kind of had to do some self reflection and saw, I'm a coach and I've always been around athletes. There was an itch there that I needed to scratch. I felt I wanted to get back into strength conditioning in the athletic realm. And I'd been in college for a while, and the idea of getting into high school really piqued my interest. I know, kind of like we spoke about at the beginning, how big of an impact high school coaching played in my life. And I think the idea of being able to serve that role for young individuals who are growing and developing physically, for sure, but also mentally, emotionally, and kind of finding their path. I think that all the resources that I pull from in my past experiences, I felt like I could offer something to a program that was looking to grow and develop, and was similar in line with what I was about. And I was very lucky to basically just off a cold call meet up with David Simino, who is our athletic director and head football coach down here in central Louisiana, which is right just outside of Baton Rouge. It's a big high school down here that, um, he was looking for a strength coach and gave me a call, and we started to talk, hit it off right away in terms of just what his vision was, what he wanted to do with his program, where he wanted to take things, not just athletically, but systematically for our community here down in central Louisiana. And it seemed like a great fit. And not just for me, but for my family. I just had a kid, and we were looking to kind of go somewhere where smaller town feel, kind of set up some roots and be able to dig in and really be able to be a part of something that we're proud of, and we can feel good about raising a family there and also be a part of that growth. So it checked all those boxes. So my wife and I packed our bags again from Virginia Beach, drove down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, down here, and it's my first time in Louisiana. Never been here before, and that's where we are now. So it's been kind of ping ponging around the country a decent amount, but right now we're down here in Baton Rouge and really enjoying it.
I think it's so funny, right? Because I've moved to obviously Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and a lot of our kind of counterparts. It's either everybody moves as far away as possible from Syracuse, or not necessarily get away, but just just kind of naturally how it goes, or they stay in Syracuse. I've never heard of somebody kind of moving to Pennsylvania and sticking around there. It's always
No,
super
you're either
far away.
going as far as humanly possible, or else you're a townie.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Well, you experience a lot of transitions, and not even just from place to place, but also from different subsections and subfields within strength and conditioning. How was that kind of introspective process for you when you were making that leap from, let's say, college athletics to tactical sector versus tactical to high school? Was it evaluating your values and what you really wanted out of the career, like you mentioned, going into high school? Was it something you were considering for a long time before you made those changes?
Sure. I think that I'm still in the process of that. I think we all are, whether we know it or not. But for me, I think that's a skill set that I've really had to try to develop over time. As a young coach, I mean, even now, it's so easy to get caught in the rat race with strength conditioning, right? Train, get better, get stronger, find ways to outwork people, find ways to deliver on what we're promising, be innovative, develop relationships, all these great things that are so important on our day to day. It is really tough to take a step back and be like, hey, what am I about? Not only for personal fulfillment, but be able to deliver and be the man that I want to be the coach that I want to be. Um, Starting off as a young coach, I mean, I was chasing a logo. I wanted to, just go to a big school. I mean, hey, look, I want to be a top dog. I want people to know me as the guy. I mean, I'd always heard of these top strength coaches, and I still respect them tremendously. And I wanted to be in that conversation and just looking to be this, just somebody who is commands respect because of maybe the school that I was at, but also just for my knowledge and the way that I train athletes. And I think there's a lot of value to that, and I still do hang my hat on trying to strive towards that goal, not necessarily at a big school or professional team, but just I want to command my room. I want to command my craft. I want to be somebody who is doing the best service that I can to this profession, not only to athletes, but growing and developing strength and conditioning as much as I can. So I think that from a young age, that's always been a through line through whatever it is that I'm trying to do and become as a coach. The idea of being like at the top of the food chain at a Power Five school, uh, you know, I still think it's cool. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's awesome to be able to coach at, top Texas and go to Ohio State. I mean, there's definitely value to that. There's not these guys who are training these kids at a very high level. You're working with elite athletes, and you have to know what you're doing, and it's a special thing. But for where I started to kind of find my way, and kind of like I said, being able to take a step back was looking at what my values are, what my morals are, what it is that I really think that my skill sets are tailored to. I've always hung my hat on hard work, doing the right thing, and just consistently showing up day in day out to give everything that you have. And that's been what I did as an athlete, as a student, and now as a coach. And I think that there's a lot of value to that in teaching younger individuals. Uh, you know, Starting out in my collegiate career, that's what I saw value in, and that's what I really was able to learn from, and kind of how I was able to progress my own career. But as I spoke on earlier, once COVID hit, it was a big reset button for a lot of us, and that's where I saw that, again, kind of coming back to that day in, day out where you just really don't have any time to reflect. Um, I saw that, there's a lot out there that I thought the military could offer me as well. And I definitely took full advantage of that, learning from the pilots and learning from our special operations community of just, you know, personal development. I was able to grow a lot from those positions. And, I think that helped to give me further education about what it is that I'm about, and who I am as a coach, and who I am as a a father, a husband, as a man in general. And, I think that was a big part of where I currently sit in terms of my development is, that self reflection of, okay, like, what do I do on a daily basis to make where I'm at a better place? How am I able to continue to grow myself personally to offer a better product to those that I work and interact with on a daily basis? And what is it that I can do to hold that standard and hold the line and be unwavering in what it is that I consistently put out, consistently talk on, and exemplify in my daily actions? And I think that that's really where that self reflection came into a very strong role, and is very much what I'm about nowadays. So there's been that evolution over time where, like, hey, like, I love working at a high school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There's you know a great aspect of that I can really pour myself into and have a major impact on these kids. Whereas if you'd have talked to me maybe 10 years ago, yeah, that's not something that I'm really interested in at all. I want to try to go and, work my way up the ladder, be a head strength coach, be a top dog. And, I think that, that's a transient or a transitioning target for a lot of different people. And for me, this is where I am in the here and now. And it's something I feel very good about in this day and age.
Well, I love the reflection on the values, right? Because I think it's something that gets lost a little bit, and especially from a standpoint of our position, we're coaches who are kind of seen as the culture drivers, right? A lot of the time, and I think that's kind of what the expectation is, even from sport coaches. And if you don't have your own value set, then how can you really display the values of the team and understand what you want to provide to the team? And I've noticed myself going through the same process. This is my fifth year as a head strength coach, solely head. And we're loading up for the summer. Everybody's going to come back in July, and I'm looking at my program, and this is the first year I've really sat down and just been like, but why? Like, why are we doing these things? What do we actually gain out of this process? This is something I took from a mentor, but how does it fit what I'm trying to do, or how does it align with my values specifically? And so it's really kind of changed a lot of how I guess I want to approach this next off season, and what I want to get out of it, because I think it's really important for you to understand your own values. And I can see even that transition piece, exactly like you mentioned too. Like, if you asked me 3 years ago, I'd be like, well, I want to be the best basketball strength coach in the country, and I want to be the biggest name by far. And I want everybody to think, when they think of basketball strength and conditioning, they think Connor Agnew, and now it's really, for me, it's a lot more about, like, I just want to make a difference in somebody's life, and there's going to be some athletes who I want to be able to get through to. And if that's possible, then I want to develop a really good relationship with them. But even then, if you're going to develop that relationship, I think you have to have a solid set of values.
Sure.
And I think that does come through a lot of self-reflection. How do you stay in that mindset of self-reflection and kind of the learning aspect that you've always talked about too? And, even the email you sent me after starting strength, right, was, you love seeing coaches get out there and try to learn and be vulnerable. How do you stay within that mindset as a coach?
Sure. I think, you know, for me, as I work my way through kind of how I see myself as a coach, I think it is important, like as you said, to detach a bit. Um, you know, I'd be lying to you if I said that I wasn't trying to be the best, right? I mean, I don't even know what that means on a a granular level, right? Like, if like to give you some tangible notion, like, Connor, you are the best basketball strength coach. But for me personally, I still do like, hey, I want to be the best high school strength coach. I want to be that guy. And that's for me to define. And I've kind of come to see that, at the end of the day, that's how do I make myself the best version of myself? And how can I drive forward, to make it such that when I look in the mirror at the end of the day, okay, hey, I did the best that I could. I was able to grow personally. I was able to help others grow, or I didn't meet that goal. How do I fall short? And that's where I really try to stack myself up. It's a moving target, as I talked about, but it's also kind of like how it sits with you personally, right? So where you see something as having value and helping you to develop, I might not put much stock in that, and vice versa. So, you know, I think that a big part of for how I develop and how I've grown as a coach is being able to take a step back, on a daily basis. It's the minute or two of reflection. Usually it's before I go to bed, just like, hey, here's the these are the things that are actually important to me, right? Like, I want to be a great father. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great coach. And I also would like to get jacked up. I like to lift, so like those things are important to me. I enjoy the process of developing those four check boxes. And those are things that, sometimes I'm not meeting one of those check boxes in favor of another because I've filled up too much of my cup with, hey, I was coaching for 12 hours that day, and, man, I only saw my daughter for a little bit. Or other times, maybe I'm being a little bit lazy, and, I just need to step up my game, and I got to be a better coach. Like, no, you need to be able to coach that kid on that rep that was at the back of the room, or hey, go and, read a journal, or go watch a podcast or a video rather than, scrolling through Instagram mindlessly. Like, I think that kind of, you know, two two battling voices in your head, it can be valuable, right? Like, saying like, hey, checking yourself at the end of the day, like, what are the things that are actually important? Understanding you can't be everything to everyone at once, and then, figuring out where it is that you can maximize and I guess, for lack of a better word, optimize who you are in all aspects that are important to you. And for me, I used to get a lot of, especially as a coach, I was getting, I think, a lot of where, I was kind of getting burnt out, and a lot of my anxiety, and also I was, just not as good of a coach person, was where I'd get to the point where it's just like, I felt like it was never enough, right? Like, at the end of every day when I do that self-reflection, because that's always been a practice that I've really, really taken to heart. I learned that from a young age. It's just kind of like taking a step back and looking and seeing where your day went and how you handled it. Um, I felt like I had to be the best at everything all at once on this day, here and there, rather than, having that Zen attitude of like, hey, this is a constant progression. Like, there's no finish line. Like, you're constantly going to be trying to develop yourself, develop others, be a better person, be a better version of yourself. And it's not like you can just check that box and now you're good, you're done. So I think as I've grown and as I've learned from a lot of great coaches, read more, had more people who I've listened to and valued their opinion, I've come to realize it's like, yeah, show up, work hard, do your best, take stock, and then grow. And that's the process that I've really tried to hang my hat on, especially as of late in terms of developing myself and learning to become a better coach.
So I'm curious about this. Do you feel like you've seen a shift really in it seems that kind of the theme to me, like a shift from the expectations of others early on in your career to what you see yourself, and the expectations of yourself that you hold. Have you put more value into how you perceive yourself and how you see yourself doing your job?
I would say yes, to an extent. I've always, I mean, maybe this is somewhat egotistical, but I've always kind of just had that role. Like even from a young age, I mean, even as a high school football player, I, all I cared about was how like what was that poem, the man in the mirror or whatever.
Yeah.
Coach Kaz, our amazing football coach from CBA, one day he put up some. I can't even remember. It was just about like the man in the mirror. That's all that mattered. I always had that kind of slogan. So I always had this notion kind of like, hey, what matters is how you fit, like your standards of excellence in all phases of life, how you measure up at on a daily basis. Because when you compound that, that becomes more and more, and you become a better version of yourself. You become and that was always kind of my measuring stick is how do I see myself and how I truly value my own opinion of myself. That can be good and bad for me personally, because where I started to get to where it was always just kind of this notion of more, more, more. Like I need, especially, I'm picking up more teams, I'm picking up more athletes. I still want to work out hard. I still want to, be able to develop myself in terms of my intellectual build. Like I had all these new inputs that I felt like I always had to constantly maximize and blow out of the water, right? Um, and I think that's where like my shift in focus always came up was like my answer to everything always, always, always was just work harder. Always work harder. Just find a way, work harder, work more hours, do more, drink more coffee, just find a way to get it done. And I think that has honestly, I mean, to be completely forthcoming, I do think there's a time and a place for that. As a young strength coach, that's what got me to work my way up the ladder. Like, you need something done, I'm on it. Like, if the basketball coach wanted something, I'm there. I don't care if it's 5 a.m. I'll set up every single field. I'll coach any athlete that you got. I'll work this, that. I'll work all hours in the day and be happy about it. I didn't really think twice about it because it was just that was my sole ambition was just to constantly try to develop. But then where other aspects of my life started to kind of fall short, that's where a lot of that kind of this inner battle and this inner dialogue came about. And that's where I think a lot of like that that stepping back, like you touched on, that reflection really helped me a lot. I don't know if it's necessarily like I don't meditate per se, and I don't like really get too deep into the Zen type of deal, but that notion really resounded with me as I've gotten older. It was just like this is a continual process, and you have to find ways to be able to maximize the time that we're given in every single moment. And if you're kind of like, I started to find myself kind of being toe in the water here and a little bit here, a little bit here, rather than like really filling up my cup and diving in on something full bore. I wasn't happy with that. And I think that's where that shift kind of came along, where it wasn't necessarily other people's perception of like what it was that I was doing. Like, sure, that was important to me. But when I was not able to say like, hey man, I know deep down I didn't give it my all on coaching that volleyball group. Well, I mean, that's not what I'm about. That's never been what I'm about. And I had to really kind of figure out what the underlying reasoning for that was. And I think that really helped me to grow as a coach and also not have so much of a ulcer and nonstop panic attacks. So that was a good thing.
I appreciate your honesty about this, right? Because I think it's something that it really affects a lot of coaches. And I think, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of strength coaches leave positions. And I think, in my opinion, sometimes it kind of comes from their own anxieties that they experience or their own pressures that they put on themselves, and not necessarily having those values aligned, or understanding exactly what they want to see out of the profession. There's somebody the other day, I looked him up on LinkedIn. He was somebody I went to school with. And, this guy was a fantastic coach. And now he's a personal finance consultant, right? And it's just like it's tough to see that because I know it's somebody who was really successful, but struggled with the balance between what you said about having a time and place where I'm just going to take whatever you got for me, and I'm going to continue to develop, and I'm going to continue to grow, and then also understanding that there it's a time and a place. It's not just something you have to completely do time and time again. But it's been interesting for me on a basketball staff specifically because there's a lot of time alone, and so it's been tough for me to really just be like, not try to read people's minds. I've got, pretty bad ADD. So my number one pet peeve, or what I do that pisses people off, if we're being honest, is I finish their sentences for them, and so like I need to get through conversations quickly. And so that's developed into me thinking I can read everybody's mind and thinking I know exactly what everybody's thinking at all times. And, I'm pretty good at it. Right. But then when you're spending that time alone, that's where a lot of my anxiety builds up about it. Right. Is like, oh, well, I know coach is probably thinking this about this earlier and how this happened. Right. And it's until I started kind of really nailing down my values and what I wanted to see out of the profession, I've, I struggled with that piece. And then now I've felt it to be a lot easier for me to understand that. And there's exactly like you said, there's a time and a place to grind. But at the same time, I think the biggest piece is, can you self-reflect, and can you, understand exactly what you want to see out of the profession? And then is your position matching that now currently, instead of kind of changing careers as a whole?
Yeah, yeah, and I think you talk about growth, and I think that that's such a huge aspect of um, this profession, really any profession. Kind of bringing it back to training. One thing where I started to realize as I've worked my way through and gotten further along, and been coaching for a decent amount of time now, was it, it's not just layering on and adding and adding and adding. It's not a constant upward, like you do this and then you just add to it, add to it, add. Just like when you train, like you don't train the same way as a fifth-year NFL veteran as you did as a ninth grader, right? Like you're gonna be squatting 4 times a week, running nonstop sprints and hills, and because you have to do that. Like it is, I do shy away from, especially like talking with young coaches. Like you got to go through the suck. Like it is crucially important to go through all the stuff that we all had to do as young coaches, where you're just logging hours and being around stuff and just constantly like you're cleaning benches, you're filling water bottles, all the cliche little things. You do need to do that stuff, and then you do need to work a lot of hours, and you do need to do a lot of the little things that are just pain in the neck stuff, and program, an excessive amount of programs just because there's so many athletes, and like there's all these things that you do need to do, but there's value and experience, and as you start to grow and develop as a coach, you can push yourself in different directions without holding on to all the things that got you there, right? Like, and that's not, again, like I think that where values and morals really come into play, and where experienced coaches and the men and women that are really at the top of the game, and you see that do it at a high level and do it with a lot of modesty, and still are able to put out great products. You see that they don't lose that young, hungry, go-getter attitude, but they're able to transfer it and utilize it at a different level. Like, I always come back to, again, kind of cliche now at this point, but like legacy, they talk about sweeping the shed. The idea of like, you may be the head coach, but you're still not so big that you aren't going to go pick up some trash and sweep up the weight room. And like, yeah, sure, you need to wipe down some benches and do some stuff that you did as a day one intern. As you get older, just to make sure that the standards are held and you're keeping your program the way that it should be run. But to say that you need to do that nonstop every single day on top of the higher level things that you can offer to other people as being a more experienced, well-rounded coach, I think it's important, at least it was important for me, being able to find that balance, right? Of like, hey, I'm not gonna abandon my roots. Like I'm still going to do the things that have made me who I am and take pride in the way that I've developed myself as a coach. And I'm not afraid to get down there and do the nitty gritty and move equipment, do whatever it is I need to do. But I also understand that my value and what I'm paid to do, number one, but then also what it is that I have my expertise in, what I believe that I am good at is being able to manage a program at a higher level and being able to work all the parts of that to make sure things run smoothly and again are meeting the standard that we want to have to help us become the program that we want to be. So I think that that's a very important dynamic of like you can't skip steps. It's not like you can just like, and I think that that's where especially with the growth of strength and conditioning, everybody sees these awesome hype videos of guys training and maxing out, and like there's a lot of work that went into that, not just from the athletes but also everything that went into that, the interns that are working to make sure that everything's set up correctly daily, the programming from the coaches, the constant coaching in terms of how to do things right, making sure that guys are staying healthy, the athletic training. I mean, there's just this gigantic enormous push in one direction to lead to that little snippet. And if we all want to try to jump steps and get to where we're just kind of at the top level, I think there's a lot of gaps in your program, but then also your ability as a coach if you haven't gone through some of, like you talked about, some of those things where you're just kind of that eager beaver and trying to figure out things, everything here, there, and that. If you're not going through at least a period of time where you've developed yourself in that way, I think you kind of don't have the toolbox to lean on when you need that.
I think what's important about it too is you've said it's a skill, right? And it's something that you have to continuously hone and have that aspect. And I think it's just clicked for me just now as you're talking, right? Why I loved the starting strength experience so much and going down and opting in was because I sucked at it. Like, and it was, like I'm going to be honest, be completely transparent. Like everybody's like, this test is hard. It's going to be really difficult to go through. And I was like, man, you know what? I'll probably still pass. It probably won't be a big deal. And I went in and I got they mopped the floor with me on my coaching and everything that I had to do. But it was such a great experience because it was part of that suck again, right? I felt like an intern again, with how, and they didn't talk down to me whatsoever, but the process of, understanding that there's so much room to grow and kind of not losing that perspective and the bigger picture of it made it so much more fun for me to come back and coach the next, for the past 2 weeks that I've been here. I've had the most fun coaching I've had in the past couple of years because of that experience, because it kind of reminded me that there's always room to grow and there's always steps to be taken and there's more stuff to be put into exactly what you see for those snippets, right? And so it's not just about, I guess, being, the coolest basketball strength coach or being the biggest name. It's about continuing to grow. And that's the process that I love in strength and conditioning.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing too, is, you got to stay interested, right? I mean, if you're just, if you're just kind of doing, recycling your program, running in and out and just kind of going and punching the clock, I mean, it'll get the job done, but from a personal perspective too, like if you're in this for the long haul and, you can coach for the next 20 years and you're just, basically kind of wash, rinse, repeat. It's like, it's fun to challenge yourself. It's fun to be, like you said, get knocked down a peg or two. I mean, I went through the exact same process. I went in and, it was back in 2012 and I took the starting strength certification, tried for the coaching route and failed. Again, it was like, I kind of came in there a little chip on my shoulder. I had an Olympic lifting background and obviously, Olympic lifting, I'm the elite of the elite when it comes to barbell, lifting. And little did I know I was kind of just, a knucklehead and, thought I knew everything. And that's when it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, geez, I kind of need to actually take a look at this stuff. I'm not as smart as I thought I was when it came to a lot of, especially like basic mechanics and the things like you talked about originally, like the why behind I was doing things was something that I couldn't come up with, and they had their reasoning, their whys behind why they train the way that they train, and why they lift in the mechanics and the form and the like the squat style that they use, things like that. Um, and it made me look at what it was that I was doing and kind of say, hey, I gotta revamp this if I am gonna be honest with myself. And that made things a lot more fun for me. It hurt. It's a hit to your ego. I felt, I was like, dang man, like I really am, kind of walking away with my tail between my legs here, having just failed this certification. But it definitely long term made me grow as a coach, and I think overall that's been something I continually try to seek out. And that's something that I learned from our special forces. The Navy SEALs are constantly finding ways to fail. They are constantly challenging themselves. I mean, we're talking master chiefs that have been in the game for 20, 30 years. They're just constantly looking ways to develop and be humbled and physically, mentally, emotionally, leadership wise. I mean, that is what allows them to grow so much. And I mean, these guys who I respected at such a high level, seeing them do that on a daily basis, just taking beat downs over and over, and then just kind of figuring out ways to overcome it and get better, that was pretty inspiring to me. And that's something that I kind of realized, that growth mindset through failure is critical. I think that I definitely had and I still have an ego. I think we all do, but I definitely had a much more pronounced ego before that experience, working with those guys. Where it's kind of like that fear of, not necessarily a fear of failure, because I've always been not comfortable with failure. I don't like failure, but I've always been understanding of the process with failure, allowing you to get better. But overt failure in front of all of your peers, readily in front of you, and like not being embarrassed by that, right? Like as long as you're putting forth the effort, like you're doing the thing, but just not having the capability to do it, but then your ability to overcome that and then show your peers and the people who are important to you that you were able to now have success in the thing that you previously failed at. That was a pretty powerful thing to see. And also, like, I know personally, I respected the guys who did that so much more than guys who just had success with everything all at once, with everything. So I think that was something that I really saw, and I tried to internalize of just like, sometimes you just got to hang yourself out there and be like, yeah, man, I suck. I'm not good at this. I'm trying, but I'm not getting this. And, let me find a way to get better so I can have success with it, which usually requires some help and kind of seeking some outside information and coaching and things like that, which help you grow and hopefully eventually have success.
What are some ways you found to continue to fail?
I mean, I've gotten pretty good at failing over my career, I suppose. I think that for me, challenging myself in ways where I I'm much more, now that I've gotten older. I put myself in a lot more uncomfortable situations that I would never touch. Just that, trying to get outside of my realm of expertise. I very much like getting involved in different clubs, activities, groups, podcasts, book, reading about stuff, trying to kind of find things that are just before, talk to me 10 years ago. If it wasn't strength and conditioning and just pure blinders about lifting, running, mobility, whatever it was, I didn't care. And that's what all that mattered to me, and what I wanted to be good at. And I tried to develop myself and became what I felt comfortable with. Now, looking into different sports, I mean, I've really enjoyed learning from, going and learning more about softball, just the sport, how they practice, how they operate, and trying to kind of find ways to kind of work my way into their culture. Um, you know, getting involved with more stuff of just, kind of trying to learn about, um, just random book to pick up at the library and try to kind of, figure out something that's totally outside of my realm, whether it's, scientific or just, I never read fiction before. Now I'll pick up a book of fiction and just kind of try to expand my horizons on that realm. And then, I think uh, as a strength coach, I guess most of us are pretty well entrenched in the iron game. And, I still do see a lot of value in just my physical challenges, just finding ways to see how my mind operates when I'm, challenging myself with different lifting. I took up, I never was, I used to like to kind of condition a bit, but similar like football, just kind of running 110s and things like that. When I was working with the operators and the SEALs, those guys run a lot, and they also do like a lot of just, I mean, crazy. I mean, it's almost not even human, the stuff that these guys would do in terms of their conditioning and their training. And I took a lot from that, just kind of trying to personally develop myself for the mental aspect of it, of just learning how to train myself to the, try to kind of see what my limits were in terms of where I shut down mentally, and kind of how that process takes place, and challenging myself on those new realms. And honestly, I see a lot of value in that. I think that that's something that I personally grow from as a coach, and just as a human in general. Just kind of these beat down workouts, and kind of figuring out how to navigate that, and dealing with failure, and challenging myself in those realms. Because in the past I'd always been, I had an Olympic lifting background, big strength. I knew how to approach a 1 rep max, and that's a lot different than you know doing the Murph with a 90-pound kid on, which these guys would break off in the morning and then go and train all day and come back and lift at night. And it was like, how is this even possible? So entering into that realm has been pretty fun for me, and something that I definitely learned a lot from in terms of challenging myself on a daily basis.
I love the long, slow cardio. I think that's where you find out a lot about yourself.
And let me tell you, man, the Navy SEAL's definition of long is way different than anything I'd ever thought was even imaginable. I mean, it's just like, I mean, yeah, again, like that was a very physically, like, one thing that I learned from that experience working with operators, again, is just the limits, the physical limitations that we can push, and how much that these guys were able to overcome just because of their mental fortitude is, I mean, it's unbelievable. And being able to see that, firsthand, it really, number one, it makes you realize just how soft and weak you are, and number two, it's awe inspiring, and it gives you something, like you said. I mean, that dose of humble pie, that humility, similar like with the starting strength uh, conference, where it's like, I used to think I was like, pretty tough. I played football. I was always kind of like, the stronger guy, this, that, rough and tumble. And then I realized, okay, you know what? I gotta realize here that there's a lot to learn. There's
Yep.
definitely a lot to learn, and it's I think that's transfers over to your daily life. I think that's something, dealing with adverse or harsh physical conditions. I think there's more to just like, the physical aspect of that. I think it transfers over to so much of your daily ability that and growth, that I think it's just something that I really value to a very high level.
Well, it's like you said, it's opportunity to fail. And it's an
Yeah.
opportunity to see what your weaknesses are, and then what you need to improve so you can continue to grow. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Tom, thank you so much, man. I've really enjoyed it. It's got me fired up for the rest of the day. I'm going to be real. I was in a bad mood this morning, so I'm glad we had this conversation. It's got me excited to coach for the rest of the day. So thank you. I needed that, and I'm sure the listeners appreciate it as well.
Well, hey, it was great talking to you. I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate what you're doing for the strength conditioning community, and I hope maybe sometime you come on down to Baton Rouge. We'll have a little crawfish boil. We can take you out, show you the sights of Southeast Louisiana.
That sounds just right to me. I'll be there. If anybody wants to reach out to you, or if anybody has any questions on anything, what would be a good way to do that? Email or social media, anything?
Yeah, emails. Emails probably the best way. I'm not great with social media.
Okay.
I lurk around, but I don't know what I'm doing. But email's best way. It's just my first initials of T and then my last name DiStasio at centralcss.org. That's my work email. I'm sure we could probably post that in the show
Yeah,
notes, but I'm always happy. I mean, I love to talk strength conditioning. I love to talk, anything about anything anybody wants to chat with. I'm more than happy to. I'll get back to you.
excellent. Well, thank you, Tom. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.